Hey guys, welcome to Outside the Pocket. We are the Friday team. My name is Giovanni and we have Kevin and MG hosting with me today. It's going to be a great show. We have a lot of fun topics, but really LA-centric topics as well today, even in the soccer community. So we're taking a little turn from what we normally do and talking about some other sports. So first though, definitely guys, National Signing Day, huge deal. Some history really was made. Kevin?
Well, USC, for the first time since 2006, had the #1 recruiting class according to scouts.
Pretty impressive. I mean, they, all in all, how many they picked up, it looks like 26 players signed, and the 4 were 5-star players, which is pretty impressive. I don't know how Sarkisian did it, if he's like just a great talker, but he pulled a lot of good ones out of that recruiting class. So I'm pretty excited. My favorite so far, probably Iman Marshall, who made the video. Such a cool way to declare that he's going to be a Trojan in the season. I think from what I believe, he got the whole video produced by Bleacher Report, but it was pretty fly how he announced his. Look, guys, we've got some visitors.
We got some visitors. Today. This is crazy. We actually, for all of you guys listening in right now, we are recording outside of the USC Annenberg building. It's a wonderful facility. We also have a lot of friends that tour this facility from our broadcast and print side of things. So we have a couple of visitors that apparently looks like they're tuning in.
Yes, we are being video bombed as we speak.
Awesome. You never know what happens in this studio, you guys.
This is great.
But first off, back to Marshall. You guys, he's the nation's #1 cornerback. So what I'm really excited about, how he's going to be able to join forces with Adoree Jackson and really get that, strong position there. And I think it's going to really force really tough quarterback throws, and he's going to be solid on defense. He can probably contribute right away, which is going to be pretty amazing for this team next year. What do you think, Kev?
Well, I mean, it's very helpful to have that in the Pac-12 where you have so many great offenses. You have very good quarterback play. So you need those defensive backs who are able to take away the good offenses, or excuse me, the good receivers that reside in the Pac-12.
Speaking of defensive backs and linebackers, we have Osa Messina, a 5-star prospect from Salt Lake City, Utah, commit to USC. Big deal. He's super athletic, can run like crazy, and I think he's going to make a huge impact on the Trojan defense.
Well, I think that's where they really want to step up their game as well. And for me, I think defense wins games. You can only have your offense go so far, but if USC really solidifies their defense, I think it'll make for big improvements next year.
Agreed.
So, who else do you like out of that recruiting class?
I was reading about the pure athleticism of Porter Gustin. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. Now, Steve Sarkisian, USC's head coach, says that Gustin played quarterback in high school, and he can hit 90 on the radar as a pitcher.
Holy cow.
Think about that. I mean, you talk about some athleticism, and then with Messina, he played tailback, tight end, and running back in high school.
Yep.
So the versatility that these guys are going to bring to USC, I mean, I'm not going to call them a national title contender for next season, but I think looking forward to 2016,
so you bring up a good point.
Right.
You bring up a good point, Kevin, which is they may not be ready yet, but do you feel like the team now has the capability of returning to the old Trojans that we used to know?
Well, one thing that definitely helps them is that they're past the sanctions. So now with you having the opportunity to actually fulfill your roster with the full 85 scholarship allotments, you can actually build a team, you can practice, you have depth, and that's one thing that's really hurt USC over the last couple of years, is the lack of depth. Now with them having their depth, they'll be stronger along the lines of scrimmage, and they'll get some added help in the running back.
Well, and a lack of fan depth too, right? Because we've seen a lot of bandwagon fans with USC where, during the Kiffin years, when the team sucks, no one's coming to the games, and then people are saying bad things about the team. But then when we're doing well, it seems like everybody's been a supporter their whole life.
But see, I don't think that's unique to USC. I think
No,
that's
it's
something.
definitely not.
That's something that really goes along all sports. I mean, when your team is very good and when they're winning, you want to show up and show out.
Well, I think the biggest thing is when you're so used to winning, and when it's a program that's used to winning, and they have the ability to actually, really impress good players to come to the school. I think that's the culture you build. It's like, oh, this is a football school, right? And we all know that. So when you're so used to winning, it's easy for fans to get really spoiled about it. And like, they suck, I'm out. And it's just tough to,
Exactly.
It's kind of how it goes. When you build yourself as a football program and people want that and expect it, they don't expect any less.
Agreed.
And keep in mind, last year's playoff teams, out of those 4, 3 of them all had top 10 recruiting rankings. I mean, you build, with this recruiting class, USC is building their base.
Right.
And with this base, like I said, I'm not so sure what they'll do this coming season, but I think 2016, 2017, moving forward, this will be a team to be reckoned with in the Pac-12 and across the nation.
Good point, Kevin. And any last thoughts about recruiting day before we move on to, or signing day rather, before we move on?
Well, there's one other player that I kind of was eyeballing was Chuma. Is that his name? Adoga. He's a 4-star offensive tackle. So he is supposedly the nation's top offensive guard. He has great arm length. He's awesome in pass protection. He just needs to work on really sinking into his hips, and he's actually a little top heavy. So if he works on that and his balance a little bit, he could actually play guard or tackle. But coming out of high school, he was ranked a 4-star recruit. So I think he's going to be another addition to their defense. Long arms, strong hands, lengthy frame. What else do you need? He's going to be solid.
You know what? My final point won't be about USC, but it'll be about signing day in general. It's amazing the pomp and circumstance behind National Signing Day. It's unbelievable. I mean, these are guys who haven't yet played a single down of collegiate football.
Right.
I mean, but they are ballyhooed prospects. But it's a circus.
Well, it is a point I touched on in my blog post last week about how they really groom players from high school recruiting into making them stars and celebrities. And so when you're fed that your whole career, I think it's really easy to say, that's a culture we live in, is you make superstars, and to kind of put them in the limelight so early on. Gio, what do you think are the effects of that for a teenager to get that much attention so
You know
early
what?
on?
Okay, it depends on, first of all, who the person is and where they've come from. So I know in San Diego, at least, from my experience growing up there, a lot of the people that go on to these college teams that come from, the area born and raised, they don't necessarily have the same, they don't carry themselves the same way as, let's say, someone from, LA or...
Well, Texas, too, when it comes to football, high school football recruiting, that's all they care about. It's solid there. And so,
Exactly.
They're taught from the moment they're able to play sports in Little League that,
Right.
hey, this is how you're going to live your life. You're going to focus on sports. And
Right.
that's,
And I think that's a huge problem. I mean, we see a lot of people going into professional sports and then having a huge ego about it. And unfortunately, I think that does a lot of harm to the sport itself. I mean, football is kind of just, it's already anticipated that there are going to be some players like, hey, I'm this, I'm as good as whatever, But in other sports, let's say, soccer, for instance, which we'll get into later, that's a sport where there's very few players that can be egocentric or really have that kind of confidence and get away with it. There needs to be this sense of team humbleness that I see, at least a lot of the times in the MLS. The European League's a little different. But yeah, I think it's a case-by-case basis.
And you know what? Something else happened interesting today. Ohio State, the national champions, they were embroiled in a bit of controversy over their recruiting. They recruited a kid named Mike Weber. He's a running back from Detroit, Cass Tech High School. And here's the issue. Initially, he pledged to go to Michigan. But as Michigan was struggling, Brady Hoke was fired. We know all the turmoil that went over there. He decides, you know what, I'm going to go to Ohio State. Here's the problem. Ohio State running back coach Stan Drayton, who helped lure Weber to Ohio State, decided to take a job with the Chicago Bears,
Oh man.
blindsiding Weber, thus causing a bit of controversy. Weber and his representatives, when I say representatives, his high school coach and others, were, quote, misled. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I
What
mean,
do you think
it's
a
tough.
commitment is? I mean, what?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes players do get attached to who recruits them and who they want to be mentored under. So I think it does affect the player's choice. I mean, how far into the process should he have said, hey, I may not be around? I mean,
Exactly.
he can't really say much either. I think it's kind of until it's done, how early on are they supposed to be communicating this to recruits that they're headed out? So I don't know what the rules are when you're interviewing and you're looking into, I guess, hopping teams. Like, what is it that you have? How
But
early
see,
on?
all this is going to do is provide more fodder to people who say, so coaches can get up
and just go.
and bounce wherever they want and whenever they want. But if you're a player, once you sign that letter of intent, you're pretty much stuck.
You're locked in.
Right.
I mean, he did tweet out, "I'm hurt as hell. I ain't gonna lie." So he's not happy about it.
Well, with that, guys, I do think it's going to be a continuing issue as we move on in sports, and it takes articles like this to really spark this conversation. But with that, I really want to bring it back into LA and talk a little bit about our soccer scene. So, for those listeners who may not know, which I'm sure you do, LA has been the home of
You sure about that?
You sure about that? Well, soccer, we all understand that it doesn't get the same attention, especially in the United States, as sports like baseball, basketball, and football. Yet on a global scene, it's one of the most important, if not the most important, sport in the world. So it's important to really understand the dynamics of it in the United States and how it relates to everything else, especially LA. So with LA, for the longest time, we had the LA Galaxy and Chivas USA. Well, Chivas, they didn't really do so great. They were struggling with fans and all sorts of factors, and things were just not moving their way. And then, lo and behold, we have another team coming to LA now.
2017, yeah?
2017, their first roster is going to be put on the field. It's called the Los Angeles Football Club. And they're going to be LA Galaxy's true rivals now. And the question that I have for you guys, one, is LA at all really a soccer community? How much do you hear about it? And two, do you think LA can hold two successful soccer teams and have both of them still be able to run seasons and seasons and seasons beyond?
I would defer to the lady first, Miss MG.
I actually I've started to like soccer. I've tracked the U.S. team, in this last run, and I actually found a respect for the game. I don't think it's like any other where it takes like tons of stamina to go up and down that field. But as to your question as whether two can sustain, I think if they market it the right way, I think it will reach a big enough fan base. But it's going to have to, I guess, where also the stadium, I know there were talks about putting it in the valley or maybe closer to Orange County. They're not really sure yet where it's going to be. But, it's going to be tough because how many LA Galaxy fans will hop over? I mean, were they already fans of soccer to begin with? And then, I mean, there's gonna be some pull. So I will say it will be tough to really rally a bunch of soccer fans to two teams now, considering soccer is a tough sport to bring into the U.S., but it is a world sport.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't know how, what's the word I'm looking for, loyal the LA Galaxy fan base is to the actual Galaxy franchise. Now, if it is a very loyal fan base, it would be hard for the newly proposed Los Angeles Football Club to convert those fans from being Galaxy lovers to, hey, come check us out. I mean, it's almost, providing an analogy to basketball, it's like the New York Knicks, Brooklyn Nets.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
New York, for the longest time, has always been a Knicks town, and the Nets were just that team across the water.
Well, just like Clippers, until they started winning, they were like, I don't think they even took down the banners for the Lakers Hall of Famers off Staples Center when the Clippers would play, And then finally Doc was like, enough. We gotta, when we play in here, it's gonna be a Clippers stadium. So.
Right. And well, if we look at one of the Chivas USA's biggest problems was the fact that they didn't even have their own stadium. They were using the StubHub Center in conjunction with LA Galaxy. So you have two teams
like the Lakers and the Clippers.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So, I mean, we know the problems that can cause, especially with the sense of this fan headquarters that, people feel like they own. Now, here's the problem. We know that LA is also in the hunt for potentially an NFL team. Mm-hmm. And there's a huge plot of land in Inglewood that is being set aside possibly for an NFL stadium.
Right.
Now, the problem is land like that is getting harder and harder to find in LA. So do you think it's a reasonable thing for them to think that they're going to be able to build not only an NFL stadium, which is not affiliated to them, of course, but potentially a whole nother stadium?
Well, from what I read, it sounds like the soccer stadium is going to be, for the most part, privately financed. So if that's the case, cost shouldn't be too much of a problem. And judging from what I've read,
though.
Now location may be an issue. Now, as MG spoke about earlier, do you move to the Valley? Do you move to Orange County? I mean, those are the logistical questions
I'd say
they'll
Orange
have to answer.
County. Just move that thing down to OC.
You say Orange County.
There's a lot of families there, and it's, it's more suburban, and I think it's a sport that a lot of families would like to take their kids to and do a family thing there.
Sure.
Just take it a little outside of LA. I think they'll be fine. And they're only planning to make this stadium fit 22 to 25,000 seats, so it'll be smaller, more intimate. Mm-hmm. So if you're not like shooting for the stars on that first, that first year, it's like, hey, we want 100K in here. Then
20,000 especially here in the United States.
And I think it's great. Like OC, I think it has a fan base for soccer. It could bring them in.
And MG, you bring up an excellent point about the OC being in the suburbs. I mean, soccer, at least here in the United States, lends itself to the suburban lifestyle. I mean, you hear about
soccer
the
mom,
soccer mom, the soccer dad.
It's a true story. And,
I mean,
and the OC...
the soccer team riding in the soccer van.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the OC really does exemplify that. I think it's a good cross between the San Diego lifestyle, which is very much kind of laid back and family, and LA, which is very hustle and bustle. So I think OC does give you that kind of common ground between the two. But, it often, what I think about is what's the target audience of LAFC? And so far right now, with the way that their website and their brand messaging is situated, they just want fans in general who are committed. So they don't want people who are like just LA fans. They go to Galaxy games and LAFC games. They want fans that are committed, but at the same time, they want to listen to those fans and really make sure that the team represents their interests.
Well, that's why I think you move it that way. Because if you think about when the Angels were in Anaheim, I mean, they were solid on the fan base. So if you move LAFC that way, I think you can really have a solid following. Like I said, the family thing, and I mean, yeah, it won't be technically LA, but if they start winning and they really build their fan base around the OC, then I guess bandwagon LA fans will come along for the ride.
I mean, we have the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Now that name
doesn't even make
think about
sense.
it. That name makes absolutely zero sense at all. Yet we all ride with it. Why? Because the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim have been a somewhat successful franchise. They have a World Series championship. They've got right now they've got the best player in the American League, arguably in Mike Trout.
Sure.
I mean, the branding works.
Well, and I'd say with them, I mean, they can call the team whatever they want, but people that live in Anaheim, people that live in, OC, they're going to still claim that team to be their team.
See?
So
and that's why
it doesn't
build it there.
So yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. Now, as much as I love to spend more time on soccer, and I'm sure we'll get that opportunity as we go
I was actually enjoying this. Someone who's not
too.
a soccer guy. I was actually enjoying this.
And this is the thing that I think we need to realize is there are a lot of sports that have the same sort of what I like to call flow. If you read a lot of sports occupational therapists' work, they talk about flow, which is this sense of
bringing academics to a podcast. Gotta love it.
We need to educate our people, right? So it's important to have this almost sort of out of body experience when you are, with your team. So whether that be screaming in front of a TV, whether that be at a game, with a foam finger going nuts and not even, the time just slipping away. That's something that certain teams have done well in Southern California and other teams haven't. So LAFC really has some big shoes to fill as far as sports franchises go, but I feel like they're going to be successful, especially their first few years. So with that, we are going to talk a little bit, go back into football, and talk about.
It never stops.
It
doesn't. Never stops.
It really doesn't. We're gonna talk. Let's talk a little bit. Looking to next season. Okay, the Seahawks have opened as their early favorites to win the next year's Super Bowl in Santa Clara, California, which is so awesome that it's going to be in Santa Clara. I think that's great. At 6-1 odds. 6-1 odds. That's crazy. And then New England is right behind them at 7-1. So do you think these same teams are going to be in the Super Bowl next year? Of course, our Tuesday team did a great job at touching on this, but we want to get your opinions as well and maybe kind of elaborate on previous discussions. I'm
going to be cautious when I say this, because obviously it's still very, very, very early in the game. I mean, the season just ended a few days ago. The way Seattle is set up right now, their core is youthful. They've got a quarterback whose poise is just incredible. He seems to be unflappable in any situation. You have Marshawn Lynch, who, even though he is approaching 29 years of age, he doesn't seem to be slowing down. I mean, they call him...
Not at all.
He's beast mode for a reason. You have a decent group of receivers. You have some very good offensive linemen. Your defense, I mean, you still have Michael Bennett. You still have Cliff Averill. Hopefully he'll be fine after that concussion he suffered in the Super Bowl. You have the Legion of Boom secondary with an offseason to fully recover from all their injuries. The NFC, I mean, I really believe Seattle has the opportunity to be a dynasty in the making. I mean, they were 1 yard away, again, 1 yard away from...
And they're going to be mad.
...accomplishing history, repeating this chance.
1 yard.
Well, but even though they're mad, we have to define who's mad, because I think Pete Carroll, although, of course, you saw him clearly depressed after that play, he's been probably one of the coaches that have been able to rebound from these things in the best way.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he had his, he had an interview, I believe, with the... it's slipping my mind right now.
The Today Show.
On the Today Show, exactly. I was going to say NBC, but yes, Today Show, of course, is NBC. So he had an interview with them, and he kind of just spelled it out, exactly how he felt. And what I love about him is he's so progressive. He takes a mistake and then tries to learn from it, and then just forgets about it.
But see, I think to have that championship mentality, you have to be resilient. I mean, look at the San Antonio Spurs at 2013. Game 6, we all remember the Ray Allen three-pointer. They're 28 seconds away from a championship. We all know what happens. They lose Game 7. We think, oh man, is that the end? I mean, and they rebound. And from what I remember reading and hearing, they actually watched Game 6 over. They said, you know what? Let's look at it. Get it out of our system. We'll move on, and we know what happened after that. I mean, to be a championship organization, you're gonna have to be able to overcome those roadblocks. You're gonna have to be resilient and coming back from losses.
What do you think about? I mean, in my mind, actually, are the Green Bay Packers. I think they will be actually in that.
Mr. Rogers.
You talk about another team that. I mean, a team that dominated Seattle in Seattle's building for 58 minutes, and to come up short like that, you better believe they're driven.
They're driven.
The Dallas Cowboys, they were arguably...
It was like a domino effect.
Yeah, they were arguably a Dez Bryant non-catch away from advancing to the NFC Championship game.
But it's those little things, I think, that really gives teams a drive to really push through and not letting things slip through the cracks for the next season. I think those are the teams that are going to be back. And, they will not let these little mistakes hinder them from, I guess, really getting their goal of winning a championship ring. It's that close. It's those little minor things. Everyone in the NFL, these teams are so solid that it could be one play. It could be, like you said, 1 yard. That means the difference between a Super Bowl champion and not a Super Bowl champion.
And Doug Baldwin touched on it. He said, hey, with everything that we had to overcome, injuries and the malaise that occurred during the regular season leading up to the playoff run, to get to 1 yard from being a repeat Super Bowl champion, I mean, granted, you wish you would have converted that yard into a touchdown and actually won the game, but you were 1 yard away from essentially beginning a dynasty.
Well, there is one thing I'm curious about, if I can jump in really quickly.
Sure.
How do you think their dynamic's going to be going into the season? Are they going to be united or divided? Because I know a lot of talks were after they left that locker room was, people were putting blame and pointing fingers at each other. Well, at the coach specifically. Let's just be
Yeah.
blunt about
Yeah.
it. How do you think they're going to go in? Are they going to be able to let that go and go in and come in united, or are they going to be torn?
I think they'll be united. And the reason why is, one, this isn't their first rodeo. Okay, first of all. This isn't Pete Carroll's first rodeo. This is an exemplar team when it comes to playing football to play football. And they really take it. I think this is what I like about the Seahawks, and I hope they don't turn into the Patriots in this way, in the sense that Patriots have become a commercial team. And what I mean by that, what I mean by that is their brand power and their sort of image. You have so many bandwagon Patriot fans every season that root for the Patriots, in the same way that the Yankees have fans from every
Why
neck
do you
of the
think that?
woods.
Is it because of Brady's the face of the brand?
Well,
here
it could be Brady. It could be a mixture of Brady and Belichick. I mean, they are a great team, and they've been around for a while. I mean, I grew up with them being a great team for the most part. So I can understand that. Now, the Seahawks, though, they're not there yet as far as their overall brand image. Once, the Super Bowl's over, the only Seahawks fans that are going to be Seahawks fans are the actual Seahawks fans.
I mean, to me, honestly, after this whole thing, I feel like I'm a bigger Marshawn Lynch fan now than I was before, and I think
absolutely.
he might be over Russell Wilson. If anything, he's the face of this team. He's kind of like the renegade that.
Well, I mean, he's the guy. He's the engine that pushes that car of an offense.
Mm-hmm.
Without Marshawn Lynch, that offense doesn't have the same danger appeal. I mean, but to answer your
I think
question,
that's their
though,
brand. That's for me.
Well,
I think.
With you guys, we're going to actually strike a lightning round
Uh-oh.
right now, okay? It is time for one. We are wrapping up our show. But with that, I have a question.
Okay.
Quiz you guys. The lightning round is, there are two teams that have been to the Super Bowl 4 times, but have lost all 4 of those times.
Wow.
Oh God.
Who are these teams?
All right, the first one's easy. The first one's the Buffalo Bills. They lost 4
That's a
consecutive.
no-brainer.
The other team, I'm gonna venture out and guess. I'll say the Minnesota Vikings.
Wow, Kevin, you are
This
right.
guy, you cannot. This guy is Mr. Trivia here.
That is unbelievable. This is a true fact. There are actually quite a few
Thank you.
weird Super Bowl moments that have happened.
Wow, the Vikings. I didn't even think.
Yes, the Vikings. The Vikings are one of them. There are also. I'll give you guys another one.
Okay.
There are 4 franchises that have never even touched the Super Bowl. Not
Wow.
once.
No appearance.
There's
no
one, Houston
appearance.
Texans.
Well, we know the Houston Texans.
And that, you got to give it to. There's obviously the fact that they're.
Sorry,
I
MG.
know, my
MG.
team.
But yes, that is
Uh.
one of them.
So 4 teams.
3
that,
more teams
that
now
have never appeared in the
that
Super
have
Bowl.
never
The Titans.
graced the grass.
All right. Well, we know the Houston Texans.
Okay,
the Houston
we got the
Texans.
Texans.
I'm gonna say the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I
That's
was gonna
number
say
2.
Jaguars was my.
The third team. Let's see.
Did you already? What about Tennessee? Are they not on that list?
I will say this: they're not on that list, but I
Okay.
will say the 2 other teams are what we would call the stereotypical, regardless of how good they've been recently, the stereotypical bad teams. At least when I was growing up, like these were the teams. Like what?
Okay. Let's see. So 2 more teams that have never appeared in a Super Bowl.
All right.
Correct.
So we've got Houston. We've got Jacksonville.
Are we saying Cleveland Browns?
Bingo.
Yeah.
Oh.
Cleveland Browns
Gotta
is
be those
one of them.
Browns. Poor
And
Browns.
that, I know, poor Browns, but once again, when I think of Browns, I don't care how good they're doing, I just automatically think
Not gonna make it.
not going to make it.
It's
So
that leaves-
there is one other team that I would consider a stereotypical not going to make it
Oh.
team, even though they've done well.
I'm
in a
gonna
few
say
times.
it. The Detroit Lions.
Bingo.
No, that's right. Why would we think of that?
Bingo. That's right. Detroit Lions. So those are 4 teams. They have never even touched the Super Bowl. So crazy, and there's even more statistics that we'll be talking about in future shows. But with that, final remarks before we close it out.
Well, you know what? I'm actually looking forward to the weekend. There's not any huge games going on, but next weekend.
Au contraire, Miss Montemayor.
What's going on?
Tonight, Golden State versus Atlanta.
Basketball.
The two best teams in the NBA, record-wise anyway, facing off in Atlanta tonight.
That's going to
And
be
Atlanta did
great
lose
game.
their streak. They didn't make it to 20, but it's still going to be a great matchup. You're right. That slipped my mind. I was looking towards the next weekend's festivities at
All-Star game.
All-Star games.
Yes.
And I saw, who's in the three-point shooting. We got Harden, Curry, we got Thompson,
Kyle Korver.
I
think Kyrie Irving. I think
Kyrie's on there, so that'll be exciting. But for this weekend, we do have that matchup.
That's going to be big. Now, Kevin, was that what you were thinking?
I was. The fact that these are two teams that, let's be real.
I actually will be
No
excited
one
to catch
in
that.
September or October had the game of the year being Golden State versus Atlanta. And like I said, again, record-wise, these are the two best teams in the league. You have Steph Curry, you have the Splash Brothers, you have Atlanta's starting five was named the Player of the Month in the Eastern Conference of January. They went 17-0. 17-0 during the month of January. I think tonight is going to be a great matchup.
So with that, I will say my closing remark will be, I think it was great to talk about soccer today and give soccer a little light. We'll definitely be talking more about sort of the smaller sports out there, which soccer really isn't a small one.
It is in the United States.
It is in the United States, but it's continuing to make traction, which is great to see. So with that, all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been another episode of Outside the Pocket. This is Giovanni signing off with Kevin and the one and only MG.
See y'all next week.
Yes, have a great
Or hear y'all
weekend.
next week.